Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner, and we're going to have a great album fight for you guys tonight. We've got Billy Idol, Rebel Yell versus Talking Heads, Speaking in Tongues. Talking Heads, by the way, are a Hall of Fame act from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And tonight we have two returning judges. Of course, we have the wonderful and super smart Todd Nemet, who's going to help us break this down. And Todd has, I think this is your third or fourth time being a judge, Todd.
This is my fourth time.
Wow. And then, of course, we have our corner master and also several-time judge, Phil Green. Phil, how are you?
Good. I think this is my third time. And it was pretty clear when you were saying super smart that you were going to throw the Todd first.
Yes.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Actually, Todd and I are going to have a really interesting conversation with Dr. Taguchi, and so Todd will get another bids pin for his banner, and we're going to talk about data and combat and all that kind of stuff. But we'll record that next month in November, and I can't wait to do that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that a lot.
For sure. And then Phil and I know we have some things coming up we're going to be doing, so that's cool. Let me stop teasing future Break It Down show things, and let's have Phil give us our corner call for tonight. Phil?
This week's album fight is a 9-round matchup between two albums from 1983 that were undeniable influences on the MTV generation. In the red corner, we have an undisputed icon from the 80s with his spiked hair and signature snarl, Billy Idol, and his second studio album from 1983, Rebel Yell. And his opponents in the blue corner, with their avant-funk grooves, a band of art school students from Rhode Island, we have Talking Heads, and their fifth studio album from 1983, Speaking in Tongues. Let's get ready to ramble! And here are this week's judges. Two really smart ones, and one, if we're honest, is mediocre at best.
All right. Yes, as you heard, this is a crazy fight. Now let's get Richard's pre-fight analysis.
What a fun album fight we have this week. Two albums from some of us old guys' formative years, and both of these have personal meaning to me. My family had a minor fire in our home back in '83, and the night it happened, I stayed at a friend's house. We go to hang out in his room, and he turns on the radio, and what song is playing? That's right, Burning Down the House. And yes, I laughed my ass off, and that song has always had special meaning to me ever since. Then we have Rebel Yell, an album that defined my early high school years. The first concert I ever went to was the Rebel Yell tour. The first time I picked a concert and went with a friend without parents. It was at Morehead State University, and my friend's sister, a student there, picked us up and dropped us off. It defined and set the standard for every concert I've seen since. And while I've moved on a bit from Billy Idol over the years, his importance, especially this album, is still there. It's integral to my love of music and still means as much to me as any album I've fallen in love with since. But let's stop gushing about this and start talking numbers. 12 parameters were analyzed, and boy, was it a close one. Getting a slight edge was the Talking Heads with 5 points to 3 for Billy Idol, but this is important. 4 of the categories were ties. So this could be really anybody's fight. I'm giving a slight edge to Speaking in Tongues because all 5 of their points came from critical categories, but you can't count out Rebel Yell because 3 critical categories ended up in ties. It will be a close one, maybe even a split decision, and while my heart wants Rebel Yell, I think the Talking Heads take it 5 rounds to 4. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, the numbers are always fascinating, and I like it that we've got Richard making predictions that are bold and based on the human effect. He's really got a knack for this thing. Gentlemen, what are your thoughts pre-fight? Phil, when you saw this matchup, actually I think you're the one that said, let's pull the trigger on this fight. What made you say, let's do this one now?
Well, so I've always been a fan of Talking Heads and David Byrne in particular. And so going into this fight, I had some affinity towards Talking Heads for sure, owned many Talking Heads albums. I even go so far as I ventured down the path with David Byrne for his all Latin Rio Momo solo album, which features many different Latin rhythms throughout the entire album, which is absolutely fantastic, and I recommend it for everybody to listen to. So I was predisposed to, in going into this fight, going, oh, Billy Idol doesn't really have a shot. Although I have to tell you, I did own this album as well back in the day, back when I was, in my early teens in Northern California. But yeah, I went into this fight thinking Talking Heads, Billy Idol can't hold a candle to Talking Heads, and that's kind of how I went into this fight.
And what about you, Todd?
Yeah, I had the exact same thought. I thought Billy's going to bring a knife to a gunfight here, And then when I started to dig into it, I wound up really liking the Billy Idol album way more than I thought. And the Talking Heads album was great as well, but it was a much, much closer one than I initially thought.
Well, let's go ahead and let's just dig right in and see what happens here. The first round is a monster just straight off the start, and this is a 9-track fight, so this will be down and dirty. But we've got round one, Rebel Yell versus Burning Down the House, and I'm going to go ahead and let's have you start it, Phil.
I would say this is probably the toughest round. There were 2 rounds that were really, really difficult for me, and round one, both these albums really just kicked the door down with putting their best foot forward and came out with heavy, body blow. It was impressive how both of them just kind of right out of the gate were super strong. I'm extremely familiar with both songs. In fact, I was singing Rebel Yell in the car with my kids driving, either picking them up from school or something. Rebel Yell was on the radio, and my kids even know this song. And they also know Burning Down the House. So these two songs are iconic in 80s lore and basically transcended the 80s. And now, I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old that know the words to these songs just because they have the influences that we listen to. They seem to pick up these songs with just by osmosis and their dad playing it nonstop. But that said, very difficult. Burning Down the House, a song inspired by the Parliament Funkadelic crowd chants. Love that aspect of it. The one downside to the song was the lyrics were really an afterthought for the song. So it was really created off of kind of this funk bed that then David Byrne and their producer said, okay, let's just throw some syllabic rhythms to this and we'll attach words to this later, which I think that was kind of almost the deciding factor for me with versus Rebel Yell, which I had no idea who Steve Stevens was before this album fight, but
yeah, me too.
I fell in love with Steve Stevens, and Steve Stevens really out of the gate just said, hey, this is who I am, and just knocked the door down with this intro with his guitar. I had no idea that Billy Idol and this guy Steve Stevens wrote most of these songs on this album, but I would say the strength of this album was Steve Stevens and not Billy Idol. In Rebel Yell, that was definitely clear, and the vocals were strong, but the highlight of the song was Steve Stevens. He shredded the guitar in the song, and I went 10-9 Rebel Yell over Burning Down the House.
That's nice. What about you, Todd? How did you have it?
Yeah, I feel very similarly about this. One thing I would say is I was not a big fan of Burning Down the House when it was a single, but both these songs were inescapable in my junior year of high school. You just couldn't go anywhere without it. It just kind of came out of the walls everywhere. I agree. Burning Down the House, I think because I'm more of a lyrics guy and I kind of lock into that first, since they're nonsensical and they were picked by how they fit into the rhythm or how they work with the song, there's really no linear meaning to it. So I think maybe it was harder for me to get into that one. I was always surprised that was their big hit, of everything. Rebel Yell is amazing. I agree about Steve Stevens. And I watched some YouTube videos of him playing an acoustic version of this, and it's amazing the work he does on there. And then also I watched the version with Miley Cyrus singing with Billy Idol, and he takes an actual ray gun, a toy ray gun, and puts it over his pickup to get part of the sound in his solo, which I thought that was pretty awesome. So it's an interesting thing, Steve Stevens. In fact, I was thinking maybe Billy Idol should have been called Steve Stevens and the handsome tenor that he got paired with. Maybe that would be a better name for their band. But anyway, so that was kind of the sleeper. So I went with Rebel Yell 10-9. The other thing was interesting. He was talking about how Leo Kottke inspired the intro that he did. So, I mean, there's some pretty esoteric influences that you wouldn't expect on a Billy Idol album.
Yeah, I was surprised with the depth of Billy Idol's lyrics. I figured it would just be baby, baby, fuck, fuck kind of thing. But it was definitely something more than that. When I did my round, like you guys, Steve Stevens just really comes out and does the job. What really, I think, what makes Billy Idol special, though, is that sound, that switch that he turns on when he gets on stage. Because if we're really honest, the number of songs that he's written compared to his level of fame, it's kind of outsized. But what you don't want him doing is singing your song, because he's just got that sexual magnetism. He's a lot like Michael Hutchence, where Michael can sing anything, and you're like, God damn, that's a sexy song. Scott Weiland, Mick Jagger, they have this ability to just make people lose their minds because of what they do. And I remember studying how he talked and the things that he said, and just the way he said babe in that song is, it helped me try to figure out how to talk to ladies back before I even had a chance, and just to teach me a little bit of swagger. So him and Steve Stevens really do a house burning track. And that slides us over to Burning Down the House. And here's the thing that we've learned from Allie Willis. And she's written more songs than anybody. But it's the groove is not subservient to the words. The groove is the master over the words, and the words don't always matter. And so that's why the Heads they're a groove band. I didn't realize it, but once they get that thing going, exactly. they work in that space. And God damn, they are choppy as hell, and they are tight, and I'm going to keep saying that because it's just true. But if you don't have an appreciation for how good this band is and how tight and how fearless they are, oh my gosh, you really owe it to yourself to listen. Like Phil, I own both these albums, and I played the crap out of both of them. These are very, very high on my all-time songs played list. But for me, Rebel Yell is just a better song. It just gets to a spot that's a little bit higher than Burning Down the House, and so it's 10-9 Billy Idol.
I was going to say, I think you'd have better luck talking to ladies like Billy Idol than like David Byrne. Yeah. That was a good choice.
David Byrne had to borrow his football-playing cousin's suit jacket, just to make a video. Round 2, we've got Making Flippy Flop versus Daytime Drama. Todd, go ahead and kick us off.
Okay. So Making Flippy Floppy, it's way too long of a song, I'm just going to have to say right off the front. But I lock into the lyrics. This kind of has this Noble Savage Rousseau thing going on, and then with paranoia kind of on top of it, and civilization corrupting us. So I like that. It wears its musical influences maybe a little bit too heavily in this sense. A lot of times they could boil it down, strip out what they need, and then make something of it. This one, I feel like the influences kind of stick out a little bit. But I like it. The lyric I really liked was "Business and pleasure lie right to your face." That's a really good sentiment. Now, Daytime Drama, I don't know what the solo is. It's like a video game or something. They held up to the microphone, and it's this is where the '80s production starts to kill me a little bit. Yeah. The gated reverb drum thing. I don't like that. The chorus is kind of creepy. Don't touch her, man. I want her over and over. So I don't know. Both of these songs I wasn't totally crazy about, so I leaned more towards talking.
So it's 10-9?
10-9.
Okay. For round 2 for me, Making Flippy Floppy, yeah, first off, it's a silly name of a song. But if I'm going to get into a car with other people, there's a very good chance either under my breath or out loud, I'm going to go, everybody, get in line. And then I'll kick that song. I don't even know I do it. It's just in my automatic sample. Like the guy that runs the sample player in my brain, he just pushes that. And it's when I heard the song, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is This has been said by me thousands of times. The rhythm section in this band, Chris Frantz and Tina Weymouth, golly, she plays the snot out of the drum. I mean, out of the bass, and they hold down a groove. It's never about Burns' words. It's just a bunch of sayings thrown together, and this is a funky band. I mean, just fantastic. And of course, I was going to always say they're so tight, but the transition into the chorus really makes this song special to me, and I can't get over I mean, keep in mind, half of this band is the Tom Tom Club in their downtime.
Sure.
So
exactly.
There's dance grooves like crazy. Daytime Drama, when Billy Idol doesn't get there, all the parts there, Steve Stevens is great. The rhythm section is fine. You got the triumphant guitar and the hand clap, and everything's there. But what separates making Flippy Floppy is not doing things like the laser sound effects that are going on in Daytime Drama. Like you said, Todd, this song's way overproduced, way too many not needless and not good sounds in there, and it's just more of a transitional song to get to something else, but we've not even started the journey yet. So if anything, it's mistracked in the album according to me, but I have this one 10-9 for the Talking Heads. Phil?
Neither of these tracks really shine for me. They're both kind of subpar what I expect from either artist. And Daytime Drama, I think they achieved the hauntingness, the haunting tone with the bass foundation. I think they achieved what they were going for, which is kind of, as Todd said, it's got this creepy sound, and the lyrics are not exactly uplifting. It's got this overall creep vibe. There was just an odd synth solo midway through the song that just, I was like, why is this here? It just didn't seem to fit. On the other side, I agree with you 100%. I mean, right out of the gates, the Franz Marshall drumming and Weymouth with their bass, it just sets this funky jam. It's got this funky jam feel with an overlay of some David Byrne lyrics. And I'm not sure what Flippy Floppy means, nor do I really care. And it just, this song, even though it was not quite up to what I expect from Talking Heads, it did have some there were some introduction of some interesting violin techniques in this song that I hadn't really heard before. And it was different, right? So we got to remember, yes, half the band is their side gig is the Tom Tom Club, but most of these guys came out of the Rhode Island School of Design. So they're all artists. And so they take an artist approach to music, and that's evident in many of these tracks, including Making Flippy Floppy. So I have Making Flippy Floppy 10-9 over Daytime Drama. I just didn't get Daytime Drama.
Yeah, I have a note. Why would they make that the second song? So I agree with you that it's mistracked.
All right, let's go ahead and go round 3. Eyes Without a Face versus My Girlfriend Is Better. This is another one where two really pillar songs line up, and I found this to be a really hard album. I mean, a really hard round to do. Eyes Without a Face, it's just a hit on a very strong album, and it's just, you need a couple more things like this to really elevate the body of work as a collection of songs. I love the flaminess and the claps. This is an MTV classic, and a big hat tip to Sal Cuevas for that foundational just bass groove that lets everything else jump off of it. Perry Lister with multilingual singing in the background. Steve Stevens just throws that duster behind him, walks to the front of the stage and throttles the guitar and lays down the licks. Just fantastic. I love the lyric of reading burner books and trying to stay hip. I've said that so many times. And then just the dangerousness of Say Your Prayers, Say Your Prayers. I love it. I love the change of pace when the song really heats up. And this is just really, really fantastic. I kind of like the image of Billy's having this slow song with his girl, or maybe it's his girl with him, and they're just fed up, and then they just take off, do some shrooms, and head to Vegas to get fucking crazy, and that's I love it. My Girlfriend Is Better. More claps, clap versus clap in this one. A lot of 80s style. I love the Nile Rodgers guitar work way back in the mix, but it's exactly where it needs to be. It's just there setting those things. And those guys all honed together in that New York disco kind of scene. So those guys were all out there. The bass groove, again, is just fantastic. And this is a band that can sit comfortably between two really disparate and sometimes 3 different genres. And here, it's part prog rock, it's part new wave, it's part funk, and they make it work. And I just think this is one hell of a song. Billy's band is awesome, but I just think that what the band is doing and My Girlfriend Is Better is a higher degree of difficulty to pull that off. Even though it's pillar for pillar, I think the choppiness of the heads wins out. This is 10-9 heads for me. Go ahead and tell us, what did you do, Todd?
I agree with so much of what you said. Eyes Without a Face is a really amazing song. And, I was watching Steve Stevens talk about this song, and he said it was like an old Frankie Valli song. He just changed the chords to major sevenths and added some suspended fourths. So it goes back. There's this theme of roots being much, much deeper than you would expect in Billy Idol's songs, or maybe Steve Stevens' songs. And, so it has these kind of cool major seventh chords just kind of going back and forth. And so that's why I think it has like a new wave sound, but then also it feels a little bit deeper than that. The first time I heard this, I heard it as I Supply the Face, which gives it a whole different meaning, actually. It makes it a little bit dirtier song. Apparently it's Eyes Without a Face. Now I wasn't familiar with the novel it was based on. Girlfriend Is Better is such an amazing song. That's what I put in my notes here. It's like Niles Rodgers has nothing on Jerry Harrison in this song. It's amazing. I had one of the first albums I ever got my hands on was Chic the Freak.
Yes.
I actually won it at the local disco station, like 7th grade, and I played the shit out of that. And so I love like good rhythm guitar, good funky bass, and it's definitely all over this. Bernie Worrell's on this song too, kind of the fifth talking head. It's just really good. They're a smoking band. I can't believe that David Byrne made Tina Weymouth audition 3 times for the band, and when she's clearly so good and holds down this beat so well with her husband. Also, the lyrics are great. I think this song's about infidelity. I think the Girlfriend is better than the whatever happened the night before. Yeah. There's kind of these weird things like OUT, but no hard feelings, and get closer to be far away. So there's kind of these oblique references, kind of like a Norwegian Wood thing going on. So I gave it to Girlfriend is Better, 10-9.
Phil?
So this was the second round that I really, really struggled with. And if I were taking the easy way out, I would definitely have scored this round a tie. That's how close it was for me. And I had to listen to it multiple times, both songs multiple times, to really, really dissect each song and figure out which one is going to get my 10 versus 9. So I love both these songs. Girlfriend is Better, just out of the gate again with that funk. I didn't realize when I listened to as much Talking Heads as I've listened to, I really never picked up the funkiness. Yeah. And it always focused on the quirkiness of David Byrne and less on the funkiness of the entire band and the sound that they have. The lyric, I got a girlfriend with bows in her hair and nothing is better than that, is it? I love that lyric. That's classic, goofy, quirky Talking Heads lyrics. And it resonated with me. I was like, that's brilliant songwriting or lyric writing. But for me, this song, there was 1 minute and 20 seconds at the end of the song, which I found completely unnecessary. Like this song could have ended and been a 4-minute song and just drug on and drug on and drug on. Like, all right, can I just hit next song, please? Yeah. I mean, that to me was the deciding factor. When we look at Eyes Without a Face, the angelic intro, it was just oh wow! Compared to daytime drama, you're jumping into this, such a the angel sounds, like Billy Idol's vocals in this song were surprisingly fantastic. And you look at the image of Billy Idol, and you're like, rough, gruff, gritty, and this song was not that. It's surprisingly soft. Granted, that's Les Yeux Sans Visage from Perry Lister, the French Eyes Without a Face. That obviously softens the grittiness of Billy Idol in this song. And then you get halfway through the song, and then Steve Stevens again just kicks into another gear, and the second half just takes off. And the deciding factor again was really Girlfriend is Better just drug on too long, kind of like my analysis of this round, just dragging on too long. And so I gave it 10-9, Isaac Leatherface.
I wanted to ask you guys, both of these bands are identified as at least early new wave bands, but wouldn't we agree that they are just miles apart in terms of where they are in the genre? Like, it's almost as if both bands don't even have both feet in the genre. Can either or both of you describe how this works, or how they can both be new wave acts?
Yeah, so I was having trouble with that, exactly what you said. And I'm thinking, who's Billy Idol's influences? Because from what I can tell, is like whatever bar band was closest down the street. This is sort of, maybe his major influence. So I found an interview with him in the mid '80s where he's talking about, and it's Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran, Elvis, obviously, and then the Beatles kicked it off for him in his head, and then suddenly it started to click into place a little bit more. Like, that's maybe he was born a decade too late. To be, he would have been in that first wave of British Invasion instead of the second wave. And then you get the Talking Heads, and they're like so first of all, they're my second favorite band out of that New York punk scene after Television. And then also, like Devo, they are consciously, conceptually artists. So they're consciously taking different influences and breaking them down and putting them in. So it's a much, much more intellectual thing. They're using similar instruments, they're using similar production, for better or for worse, and so there are those similarities in that they're new wave, but where they're coming from is miles apart.
Yeah, and then Billy also was, for whatever reason, got identified early in the punk scene because he was in Gen X before this, and that was just barely a band. I mean, I've owned Gen X albums, but it's just you don't think of Billy's work as a punk or a new wave body of work. But yeah, it's in there. You can hear little notes of it. It's just it's hidden behind a whole lot of kick-ass rock and roll.
I don't see Rebel Yell I would not classify them as new wave in the new wave. We grew up in that new wave sound era, right? And me coming out of skate punk and getting a foundation in that, Billy Idol was nowhere near that to me. Billy Idol was more MTV pop rock as far as I was concerned versus...
This episode of the Break It Down Show is brought to you by Lions Rock Productions.
That's us.
We publish, evaluate, and develop podcasts just like this one, consult others to build their own, and create associated content and content marketing strategies.
So if you're launching or expanding your social media presence, your business or your personal brand, or if you just want to take your media presence to the next level,
reach out to us on Twitter
at Pete A. Turner
or at JohnLG69
at the Break It Down Show.
There's 1,000 ways to get a hold of us.
Now enjoy the show.
More MTV pop rock as far as I was concerned versus the artist in Talking Heads definitely shows, and that quirkiness throws them from that funky foundation into more the new wave, just based on, if you listen to the lyrics, things are kind of more in that new wave vibe as opposed to, and they're more, I don't remember which one you said it, but they are definitely artists. If you look at what they've done beyond the music on the album, their music videos were very artistic. Mm-hmm. They produced movies based on albums, and they were one of the first bands that would go out and one of my favorite movies / albums is True Stories by Talking Heads. So, and to me, they are more the definition of new wave than Billy Idol, even though you might want to classify them. But even then, Talking Heads is more than new wave. They're this multi-genre band, and this album really shows the funky roots that I think is not really inside that new wave label.
And I think it's fair to say too, between our age span, Phil, you're the youngest, and it could be that your musical brain turns on when Billy had kind of turned that corner and been more of a, I don't want to say pop rock band, but that label of being punk rock and then new wave, maybe didn't resonate with someone who was newer to him and later in his career. Do you think that's fair?
I always thought Billy Idol was Billy Idol until I did this album fight, and then I realized that Billy Idol, the brand, is really Steve Stevens and Billy Idol.
Yeah, and exactly.
I don't think Steve Stevens is he's more the rocker than the punk influence. Mm-hmm. And I would never classify Steve Stevens as a new wave guitar player. So to me,
you're right. He's like kind of a Steve Vai zone, a little bit more intellectual. And I tried to figure out his influences, and it's just basically everything from prog rock to Jimmy Page to, jazz guys, folk guys, Joni Mitchell. So he's bringing a whole truckload of influences and musicianship there. But you're right. You're right. He's not a new wave musician.
And that dun, 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 that's super Jimmy Page right there. Like that's just that's straight off of Led Zeppelin. Well, let's get back to it. Round 4, Blue Highway versus Slippery People. Todd, what'd you have?
All right, Slippery People. So I have a confession to make. There was a period in my life when I read a lot of UFO books, a lot of alien visitation books. And
used to.
Yeah, used to. I read all of them. They're all gone. So I catch the references to the first chapter of Ezekiel in this song, and which I've always read as and different conspiracy theorists have read as a visit from aliens and spaceships coming down, wheels within wheels, that kind of stuff. So this is either about alien visitation or is deliberately about the first chapter of Ezekiel. It fits in obviously with the religious theme of the title of this song, and maybe that's how it's related, and it has a kind of cool call and response. So that's my over-analysis of the lyrics of it. Blue Highway, again, he's grabbing you with a guitar. This is Steve Stevens and his handsome tenor friend. It's an amazing guitar solo. It's amazing. I'm not exactly sure what the lyrics are about. Maybe taking drugs. He was still about a decade away from his big motorcycle accident where he almost lost his leg. Otherwise, I'd say it was about that. This was a close one for me, but I went with Slippery People just because I like the aliens. 10-9.
All right, Phil, how'd you have it?
So Slippery People, I didn't get as deep as Todd into who are these slippery people. I just assumed that they were kind of slimy, manipulating people, but I tried to focus on the music of this, and I found the intro with its staggered entrance, going from percussion, adding bass, synth, guitar, really kind of caught me and grabbed me. And as Todd mentioned, the call and response vocals really resonated, and it worked for me, and I was like, oh, I really like that. And then I got to the middle of the song. It was very tedious for me to get through that part of the song. I'm like, oh, okay, when is this going to move on? And so that's kind of where I got caught, was in the middle. Versus Blue Highway. This, to me, was a Steve Stevens showcase. Let me show you what I can do on the guitar. He grabs you right away from the intro, and the entire song. I'm not sure who the mastermind is for Billy Idol, but I felt throughout, and particularly in this song, that there was definitely a formula at work here, and this song was playing to that formula for sure. And I don't know if that's the producer, Steve Stevens, or the combination of all three, Steve Stevens, producer, and Billy Idol, but it definitely felt formulaic, but the formula worked for me, and I really enjoyed the featuring of the artistry of Steve Stevens and his guitar in this particular song. And he shined in it, and I don't know, maybe Billy Idol was foreshadowing his motorcycle accident in this, because it does mention dying on the Blue Highway, but yeah, I give it 10-9, Blue Highway over Slippery People.
Yeah, I think you guys are getting it right. And this was kind of a tough round, but I also noticed that these weren't really, like from the first 4 songs, this song for me felt like that was the weakest for both of them. And they seemed to line up well with that they both took a step back in a different direction. More than any other song on the album, Slippery People for me was just a little too Casio keyboardy. Like the sounds, and I can't describe it any better than that, but like the sounds are a little cheap on the keyboard side, just too easy maybe, or they just don't work. But then I'm also reminded that this is dance music, and this is what makes the Talking Heads a crazy band, because they're funky, they're new wave, they're prog rock, they're a dance band, they have all these things they do. And so, what the hell do I know? The chorus is catchy as hell. I mean, this band has just got hooks wherever they want to put it, and I love like the lyrics, like "Stop acting crazy." I love that. This album isn't weak at all. I mean, This one isn't as strong as the first three songs, but it is still very good. And like you guys have both noted, this is like a Steve Stevens showcase. Now, personally for me, I don't want to hear too much from the guitar player, and Steve gets there a couple times where I'm like, that's just a little too much triumphant guitaring. But then there's other times where like he's changing the sounds that are coming out of the guitar and using effects well, and it's a lot better of a song when he's not quite so on like 11. Like when he's on 9.5, I just tend to like that better. But when I look at these two songs, there wasn't too much Steve Stevens. He's right there on the line where I'm like, I'm not comfortable with it, but I can dig what you're doing. So I went ahead and went 10-9 for Billy Idol. All right, round 5, I Get Wild versus Flesh for Fantasy. So let's go ahead and have you kick this one off, Phil.
Flesh for Fantasy, for some reason the song, I've liked this song a lot since maybe I was a teenage boy, and this seemed to really hit home with me. But when I listened to it from a musicality and analyzed it from an album fight perspective, the tone with the strong bass intro was set from the start, and I loved it. The dreamy chords. Steve Stevens again with his dreamy guitar chords kind of took you into that fantasy. And really Billy Idol, his vocals were solid, but I didn't really feel like Billy Idol was the star of this song. But again, the more I listened to this album, I was like, wow, okay, Billy Idol isn't, maybe Billy Idol isn't who I thought Billy Idol was, right? And maybe he was just a face of this marketing idea for the album or for the record company. But I like Flesh for Fantasy. I didn't really I Get Wild Gravity. It was nothing extraordinary about this song. Burn, his vocals were good, but I didn't really get it. And so I went 10-9, Flesh for Fantasy over I Get Wild Gravity.
This was a hard round for me because these are two very good songs, and these songs keep matching up a lot of similarities. There's some dance hall elements in this funky, groovy song for the Talking Heads, and just keep this short. As great as Tina Weymouth is, she can't beat Billy's smoldering singing all by herself, and that's really what this comes down to. The dance hall idea is kind of cool, but it's just there's not quite enough here, and they never, I don't know. This just feels like one that you just pick the needle. I played this on my record player a lot, so it's like pick the needle up, slide it over, and I actually remember doing that with this song where if I was up and near my record player, I was going to skip this song. Whereas Flesh for Fantasy, this is Billy's voice alone, that flesh, that just, oh yeah, that I'm experienced. All these things that he says are fantastic. If I had to pick a nit on this song in terms of lyrics, he uses the lyric, is there someone else tonight? Like, turn the light on, is there someone else tonight? I always thought it'd be better if he left the lights down and said, I am someone else tonight. Like there's some sexy role-playing going on, because that kind of fits the song better. And it's just a little bit more fun. But for me, it was an interesting round, hard to judge, but I had 10-9 for Billy Idol. Todd?
All right. I went the same way, and I have to tell you, I watched all the videos as well as for nice. Preparation for this podcast. So I watched all the ones I could find for this album. I think there were 4 of them. And then I watched the Talking Heads videos that I could find. And one theme in Billy Idol's videos I've noticed is women slapping their butts in time with the music. That seems to be one of the themes. The other theme seems to be lots of sneering. And in fact, at this point in this video, I was laughing so hard because he was sneering so much. It looked like maybe he was having a seizure while they were filming it. I mean, you have to watch it. It's the most 80s thing I've ever seen. So these can be enjoyed on a visual level as well as a sonic level. And also, both these albums were really pushed by MTV, which is part of the reason that they were so ubiquitous to us at that time. Phil mentioned that wavy guitar, the kind of abusing the whammy bar that Steve Stevens seems to do. Some of the lyrics are kind of gross. Like you said, there's one, you see and feel my sex attack. Yeah. It's a little gross. It's like, I don't know, like he's a sex cat or something. So But I did like the song overall. I like the feeling of it, kind of the theme of it, the whole thing. I guess maybe it's better than the sum of its parts, you know. With I Get Wild, I was just taking notes as I was listening, and I wrote like fake reggae.
Right.
You know, I felt it was one of the weaker songs on the album. And one of my notes is, I'm tired of them strip mining every black musical style for some shred of ore. That's what I wrote. And, you know, and so this one, it doesn't quite hang together with everything that they're trying to do. It still cooks because it's Talking Heads, but it's just compared to everything else on the album. And also, you know, there's been some mention of so some of the songs being way too long, and I think that's kind of the Afrobeat influence of it, because, you know, you listen to Fela Kuti stuff, it's, you know, one song per album side, and so I think that's some of that influence coming in that makes these songs drag out a little bit. So in this one, I went for Billy Idol 10-9.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like groove bands too, which I think the Heads are, they have a little problem self-editing, you know, because they want the groove to go and they trust the groove, and so sometimes we pay the price because they.
Well, you know, with Girlfriend Is Better, I think that was the one where Phil said it went on too long. I was kind of happy. I'm like, good, we get to spend some more time with this funky groove.
Right.
So
there you go.
I mean,
shows what
maybe
we know.
like the first couple times I heard it, I was like, oh, good, we get to spend time with this, and kind of Nile Rodgers thing going on. But you're right, though. After a while, you're like, okay, the song's over. It's
yeah, especially like in this format where you're like song. You're like, okay, one or two of them going on for a while, but it definitely got a little long for sure.
Yeah.
Let's go round 6, Catch My Call versus Swamp. So when I was 13, we went to South Florida for vacation, and Rebel Yell and the Go-Go's were the two tapes that I brought with me on that trip. My dad upgraded and rented the Camaro, and we drove all up and down Florida, Space Coast, the Keys, the whole thing. And so I just listened to these albums nonstop. And I was also, by the way, blown away by all of like the yellow paper, shitty bound, big time professional wrestling magazines available in Florida. Because that was like, I was in a fantasy world for a kid that liked big time wrestling. It was fantastic. But these songs from this album, they're burned into my head, and I'm constantly taken back to that trip. You know, involuntarily, this Billy and his music takes me there. So it's always enjoyable for me, and I really enjoyed Catch My Call, and you know, it's a fun trip down memory lane, and that's the best thing I can say about Catch My Call. Swamp, though, this is an advanced band doing advanced things. It's a swampy, new wave, bluesy groove, and any band that's this comfortable and this successful pulling off this blend, to me, I just, you know, I stand in awe of that, because they're so familiar in so many ways, and they make choices that resonate with me. And maybe it's because I've heard this album a million times, but I just, again, higher degree of difficulty than what's going on in Rebel Yell. So this is 10-9 Heads for me. Todd?
I agree with that. So let's start with Catch My Fall. Oh, by the way, my son and I also rented a Camaro and drove up and down Florida.
See?
So, yeah, we started off in Orlando. We ended up in St. Augustine, or Savannah. It was great, though. We shot machine guns. We listened to Jethro Tull. It was a good old time.
Jethro Tull. When's that? We got to do a Jethro Tull album fight.
Oh, that'd be good.
And I got to be on that because they are one of my. Jethro Tull is one of my all-time favorites. I love Ian Anderson. So anyway, sorry, Todd.
Catch My Fall is interesting because I wasn't super familiar with this song, and my notes. I can't believe John Hughes didn't use this in a film. I can picture Molly Ringwald sitting in a pink Carmen Gia or something and listening to the song and crying her eyes out. That's what I think of when I hear this song. There's even a saxophone in it. Again, we're abusing the whammy bar.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens is, but I think it's great. I just think it's a really good song. I'm surprised that this wasn't put out as a hit. But like you said, Swamp is on a whole nother level. And again, Jerry Harrison's doing his Nile Rodgers thing and kicking ass. And just like you said, David Byrne manages to script this line between being super pretentious and making fun of himself. And this is an example where he does that. At the beginning of the song, he's just kind of going, I'll tell you a story, you know. And I'm like, what the hell is that? You know, like, who else could get away with that? You know, like, I'd rather be stuck in an elevator with Billy Idol than David Byrne, for sure. but the stuff he brings to it, like the weird, just the influences, and then the way he wears it, just kind of completely unironically, is so interesting. So this song was very good. Obviously, as a blues thing, it's like a weird Cab Calloway thing going on with the high. I think it's about getting blown up in nuclear war or some kind of apocalyptic thing is happening, which also adds to the religious sort of theme of this and the title of the album. So this is a whole different level than Catch My Fall. So I gave it Talking Heads 10-9.
Phil?
So I think we're going to have another bushfire versus brush fire with you, Pete. You called this Catch My Call and Catch My Fall. So,
Catch My Fall, sorry.
No, that's all right. It's all right.
Typo.
I find it humorous. The funk continues with Swamp. This was a little bit of a tough round for me as well. I love the highs. I mean, it was just great. I was singing that all day yesterday after I heard that song. I was just like, hi. Yes. It was great. I love that part of the song. It's a fun song overall, and those that have listened to me on previous album fights know I love fun, happy songs, and this was a fun song. My issue with this song was it was more of a funky groove bed with some spoken word over the funky groove bed for most of the song. And I didn't feel that it was the musicality of the lyrics was not there versus Catch My Fall. I think it was Steve Webster that jumps in there with the strong bass and then completely surprised by Mars Williams jumping in with the saxophone. I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
That song was a complete departure from everything else we've heard prior in this album. And it was just it caught me off guard. I'm like, wow, surprise, right? And obviously I've heard this album before, but when I'm listening to it from a more analytic point of view, I was like, wow, okay, this is a definite significant departure from at least musicality from what we've been hearing. And so I went 10-9, Catch My Fall, just because I wasn't a big fan of just David. I tried to hear him sing the lyrics, and I just felt like he was talking, and then it was just that constant groove, and so to me, I like the more, I could see it in a John Hughes film, the Catch My Fall. So I'm 10-9, Catch My Fall over Swamp.
Fair enough. Round 7, Moon Rocks versus Crank Call. Hopefully I've said the right words this time. Todd, kick us off.
I think I know where Todd's going on this one just because it's got moon rocks in it.
Well, obviously it's slang for MDMA. It's a drug song. Oh, you thought I was going to talk about the alien aspect. He did talk about being on the moon and eating moon rocks. But I think it's drugs this time instead of aliens, the kind that come on the side of the baggie. And actually, I'm not sure which one would have been around in the early 80s. This song is the most Fela Kuti-like one on the album. I think it's kind of the most straight-up Afro-pop or Afro-beat. And in my notes, I made a note here. It said, I wish George Harrison went to Mali instead of India. Like, wouldn't the Beatles have been like so much better? Yeah. Those are like the worst songs.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, there's another flying saucer reference in there, thus proving my theory about David Byrne and alien visitation. And then this breaks some kind of law of rock and roll by having a 6-syllable word, transubstantiation, in rock song.
That's great.
Almost disqualifying them. And again, it's a little bit too long of a song. Then we got Crank Call, and this is where, we're talking about Steve Stevens not being a new wave guy. So you get this 80s rolling synthy thing going on, and then right after it, a 70s guitar riff, like right out of Led Zeppelin or something, and you're like, what is going on? It's a little bit anachronistic, and I have no idea what the lyrics are about. And I have no idea what Billy Idol's doing with his voice during this song. It's like he's got mashed potatoes or something, and it's a weird song. I was not crazy about either one. I went with Talking Heads.
Phil, how did you have round 7?
Well, Crank Call, I had an issue with the lyrics. So I thought the whole point of Crank Calls was to have fun with the Crank Calls. And, the people that were performing the Crank Calls, it was a fun, devious activity. And the lyrics say, Crank Calls ain't no fun at all. And I'm like, no, I thought they were supposed to be fun.
Not
so maybe
to receive them.
The whole, but I'm pretty sure that Billy Idol's not the one receiving the Crank Calls. I think he's the one giving the Crank Calls. But the lyrics seemed very simplistic. I was like, I don't know. It just didn't. this song just, it did not hit me right. And Moon Rocks, again, you know, the funk comes out with, and I have no idea how I missed this before, but, you know, I just didn't realize, I didn't really associate funky beats to Talking Heads. And this song had me with Flying Saucers, Levitation. I'm like, okay, I'm in. 10-9, Moon Rocks over Crank Call.
So for me, Moon Rocks, I'm a bit worn out with the groove-centric tunes, and I kind of need a break. And you know, David gives it to me a little bit with the megaphone. Anytime you break out these alternate things, and everybody knows I like the glockenspiel, and I have to confess I like a megaphone, whether it's Michael Stipe or Bono or somebody else using it.
Or Tom Waits.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, anytime they grab it, for the most part, I'm going to dig it. How about Chuck D using it? That's just, it's always a good choice, and something... It's crazy that the megaphone has become an instrument of choice. I bet the guy who invented it never thought that would be the case. It's just, this song is I won't call it filler, and there's some weird percussive sounds that I think are unnecessary. It's 80s, so it's a little overproduced, and for me, it's the weakest track on the album. Simultaneously, also, Crank Call is probably the weakest track on the album. Oddly enough, they seem to like to match up strength for strength and weakness for weakness. And this song is straight up filler, like you guys have kind of noted. When I heard it, I heard Steve Stevens' lick, and I said, oh, someone just got done listening to some Loverboy and lifted some Paul Dean, because...
Okay, I was trying to place the riff. I could not place it.
I mean, that's where I put it. I could be wrong, but I instantly went, this sounds like everybody's working for the weekend or something.
A riff in another song. I just couldn't place it.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right, so yeah, you didn't work that hard at it, and, you know, you don't want to have a 7-track album, so I get that they, you know, put something together, but... Neither one of these songs is great, but I have to pick a winner. It's 10-point must, so I'm going to go Talking Heads, 10-9. Round 8, the penultimate round. Do Not Stand in the Shadow versus Pull Up the Roots. I guess this is mine to start, so here's what I'll say. This one for me was a song that could have been on Caddyshack, I thought. Don't Stand in the Shadow. It's very dated, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It sounds good, and sometimes dated, it works, you know, because oldies get to be oldies. I don't care for all of the Steve Stevens in this. Again, the triumphant guitar for me is sort of... It's easy to fall into the excess zone for my ear, and I don't necessarily like that, but I do like the different effects he uses with the guitar, and he changes the nature of what he's playing. I like that a lot. I don't like the excess a lot. This song sounded very Gen X-y to me, if you guys are familiar with Gen X's catalog. It's maybe like some extra stuff that maybe Billy had in the back of the catalog, and you know, it's not a super strong, but I think it's okay. I would love to see them replace this song or the last song with a good cover, because Billy Idol's so great at covering other people's shit because he turns the sexy up. He doesn't do that here, but that's all right. And then against Pull Up the Roots, I've heard this. It's dancey. It's fun. The bass part is always cool. The band is groovy. But, I mean, we've heard all of this before. There's nothing new here. Maybe if the song was earlier on, I like it better. But I will take the Billy Idol and crew bag of tricks at 10-9 over what Talking Heads offer. Phil?
Do Not Stand in the Shadows. The intro with the melodic sounds I really enjoyed that part of it. And it's funny you mentioned dated synth sounds in a song, because that was the next thing I wrote. It's like, oh my God, the synth is so dated, right? They just can't get away from that. You know, you're locked in the 80s with that sound. That is definitely for sure. And I found the song to be very repetitive. And again, we see a reemergence of Steve Stevens trying to show us what talents he has. And so he was impressive on the guitar. On the other side, Pull Up the Roots. Let me just say that neither of these songs, from my point of view, were very impressive. And I felt like they were kind of like, all right, you know, not quite filler, because I think our filler round was round 7. But we do have to fill out this album with some other songs. And in the case of Talking Heads, Pull Up the Roots, they added some unique keyboard sounds. But it really, like, again, there was it was almost like spoken word poetry type lyrics over a bed of music, and I wasn't quite sure what he was saying. I didn't get, were we talking about towns uprooting themselves, and why are they uprooting themselves and moving? I didn't quite get it, and so the vocals seemed a little thin there. So in the two of the lesser performing songs or tracks in round 8, I went with Billy Idol, Do Not Stand in the Shadows, just because I felt like it was, I felt like we were listening to a David Byrne poetry session with Pull Up the Roots. So I went 10-9, Billy Idol.
Fair enough. Todd, round 8.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said. Phil, it is like a spoken word kind of thing. You can picture like somebody snapping in the background instead of their groove, and this is more of the same, which is what I wrote in my notes, kind of getting back to what Pete said. I think this song also is about drugs. You're kind of pulling up the roots of consciousness, if that makes sense. And I think there's even some lyric in there about looking forward to that. So I agree. It's a little bit samey from the rest of the album. It doesn't really divert in an interesting way from what we've already heard. Do Not Stand in the Shadows. I think this is actually a really good song buried under a bunch of shitty 80s production. I think we're ready for like a hipster band to cover this, maybe drop out some of the choruses like Phil said to tighten it up. And I think somebody could do this and make it really good. This could be a great song. Also, this confirms my theory. Every 80s rock album needs the siren sound effect or ambulance played on the guitar. It's like the law of 80s rock. The other thing is with the keyboards, with the guitar and what he's doing with the guitar. Steve Stevens, in an interview that I read, he actually tried to do as much of keyboard sound with his guitar as he could. So there might be stuff that we heard we thought was keyboard that was guitar. I was having trouble picking it out when you consciously listen to it. But I thought that was kind of interesting. But anyway, yeah, so then my notes, I'm like, oh good, the album's finally picking up again. But it's going to end in one more song. So I gave this one to Billy Idol 10 and Talking Heads 9.
Fantastic.
I must be like really naive because I'm not picking up any of this. Like all this drug culture stuff you're talking about. Oh, it's supposed to be about drugs. I'm like, I thought he was really talking about aliens. I really thought he was talking about uprooting a city.
I thought he was really talking about moon rocks.
Well, the lyrics, again, the reason I think it's called Speaking in Tongues is because they were making up the lyrics kind of, David Byrne, he said in an interview, he shouts out just random syllables and then they kind of keep, what they could. Like Burning Down the House could be called like Rubber Island USA because that's what he was singing before. So there are a lot of weird kind of things. So it's hard to get a lock on it sort of literally, but that's just sort of what I took away from this. Not being a heavy drug user, it could be something that I'm missing, but I'm not projecting. Let's just say that.
And you look at the era and where they're at in New York. Andy Warhol. I mean, who's not getting high amongst their friends? And then the other thing is David Byrne's always put up as this, and I'm not saying he's not, but he's always put up as this genius. And the more people talk to you, the more, people are going to be like, yeah, whatever. So if you say weird ass shit, they're going to be like, that guy, he's so smart. He's so above me, so who the hell knows?
Yeah. He's either crazy on drugs or a genius.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Pick one of those three.
Well, the thing I like about David Byrne is he has this interesting way of standing outside of things and observing them, like I said, without irony and saying it's okay to like it. Whereas there's a lot of music that is like, this sucks, or the system sucks, or the man sucks, or this sucks, and the only thing good is like, sex or drugs. And he has a way of like saying, oh, buildings are good, like walking around the city is good. And he comes at it from kind of a positive, like way of projecting things. I think because in some weird way he's outside of things. And that's something I've always liked about the quirkiness.
You just described the whole premise of True Stories.
There you go.
He goes into this small Texas town and sees it with child's eyes and like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. Right? Super positive about everything in this little town.
True Story, round 9 is upon us. This Must Be the Place versus Dead Next Door. So 2 place-based songs. And let's go ahead and you kick it off, Todd.
All right, let's dispense with the Dead Next Door quickly. Sounds like a rejected Thompson Twins song, and I think this is sort of it's the new wave tradition. You end your album with your deep song, so that when you pick up the needle, you're like, whoa, my mind's blown. So I was not a huge fan of this, so there wasn't much I liked about it.
That's a great analysis.
This Must Be the Place, parentheses, naive melody, close parentheses, is a fantastic song. This is, they all swap their instruments, and amazingly that worked. It's not always successful when bands do that. This song, including the video, is extremely poignant. It's almost like a cottage industry. There are all these covers of it, and there's even a movie based on the song. And I read a very ponderous New Yorker article about this song. It's almost like a little mini industry in itself. The thing I think that's so affecting of this song is, and I'm going to try not to say a particular word, but imagine you had a neurological condition where you didn't relate to people in the same way as most people do, and you find yourself in love or very attached to somebody, but you don't really understand it. So the thing I find very poignant about the song is sort of standing outside of these really strong feelings, and he's observing them. So it's a weird perspective. You get, she loves you, yeah, and you got, he loves you, I love you, and then, but this is like within himself, there's this detachment and observation, where he says, and you can see it with things like home is where I want to be, but I guess I'm already there. So he doesn't even understand what's happening. He's just kind of writing it down. And he also says, I feel numb, born with a weak heart. I guess I must be having fun. And so he's either uncomfortable or unable to sort of fully have these emotions. And it's like a love song by somebody who can't actually feel love. So it becomes extremely poignant because there's that strong emotional component, but then there's also this undercurrent of alienation underneath it that I think is so genius in it. And then at the same time, there's kind of this, bouncy melody going on, rhythm, going on like we've been experiencing all album. So it's really quite an amazing song. And I think that's why it's related. And the video is really poignant. I've never seen it on MTV. You can find it on YouTube. And it's the band, the whole band, including the touring band, are sitting around just watching home movies of themselves and laughing and joking around. And then they go downstairs and they jam in the basement, and David Byrne does a little chicken walk up to the microphone. And then at the end, a mom comes in with cookies and tea, and they all just like hang out together. So it's weird because so much of this other stuff is like, kind of detached and kind of unironic, and this is just unironically saying, being with your friends is the best thing or something. It's weirdly affecting for a 3-minute video. So I went with 10-9 with Talking Heads by a landslide.
Yeah, I guess I'll dispense with Dead Next Door to Billy croons to close the fight, and that normally would be fantastic. And and this is a great album, and I'll do the disclaimer now. We love these albums. I own both of them and have played them hundreds of times myself. So they're in the ring because we love them. And Billy closes the album the way he thinks he needs to. He shows off his vocals, and it's either him or Steve Stevens. Really, nobody else in the instrumentation department really got too much of a shout out, because unless you're doing something like, holy shit, that's a sax, it's these two guys, like we've said over and over again.
Yeah.
So congratulations. They use clapping again because they like to clap on this album, whether they're slapping a girl's ass or doing a flammy clap. We got to have that. Billy's going to be all right. I don't think he wins this round. And I'll just say, I really liked what you said, Todd, and it made sense to me, because when you listen to the lyrics, it's a bunch of cliche catchphrasey things. So here's this love song, but it's not even as deep as a puddle, because the words don't necessarily mean anything, and yet simultaneously they don't come off as being fake. Like it's an interesting balance that David manages to pull off. And I know they all change instruments, but this band is so good they can play anybody else's instruments anyhow. That's just them just having some fun at the last song. But really, just the complexity of what they pull off with the vibe and the lyric and everything else, I think it's great. It's funny that Wall Street, the movie Wall Street with Charlie Sheen and Michael Douglas, used this song, and they're like, it just doesn't fit what you would think about that kind of a movie. And then the Lumineers have covered it. So if you want to really see how wide the influence is in this band and this song, it's just a really well-crafted, again, just advanced band. Like if there's band 101 is Blue Highway, this is like senior, like upper division, like a 420 level class, or even a graduate level class in music.
Yeah, the graduate seminar.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that a drug reference?
You know what? I accidentally, it was. Yes, yeah.
Okay, I picked up on that one.
I like executive seminar. That's exactly what I want to say. Like, we're going to go fast, we're going to get high level, and you can either keep up or you can't. And that's exactly what this must be the place is. So I go 10-9. Phil, close us out.
This album fight, they both started out with really strong tracks in track one or round one. And I felt like in round 9, they both closed with also what they thought were two strong tracks, not knowing that they were going to be going head to head in this format. But I thought that they closed out their albums with, not necessarily their strengths, but with two strong tracks to lead them out the door. But The Dead Next Door, I'm not sure what that necessarily means, but it's a ballad. And I wasn't expecting a ballad necessarily from Billy Idol, but the intro was both beautiful instrumentally and vocally. The tone of the guitar throughout the song was just sonically pleasing to my ears. And it was just a little bit different than what I'd been hearing from the gritty, raspy, guitar-heavy rest of the album, and I liked it. It was almost like cleansing my palate right before I move on. So I enjoyed The Dead Next Door. It sounds like more than the two you did. This Must Be the Place. This is David Byrne, who somewhat seems to be, I don't want to call him emotionally challenged, but his ability to read emotion and things like that, I think he guards that, right? As Todd was saying, he wants to tell you how pretty this building is and things like that versus let's talk about my feelings, right? And I don't think that's a comfort spot for him. In fact, this is one of the only love songs he's written. And this particular song has experimental aspects to it, not only instrumentally, but also lyrically. And I had to actually, I wanted to know what that keyboard or piano sound was, where it basically took a note and then within that same note took it up an octave. And so it's called a piano glissando. And I really enjoyed that part of that song, that musicality and experimentation with that particular thing. I had to look at, wow, okay, so this has a different keyboard sound. What are they doing here? And realize that it's something called a Prophet synth that they use, which is different than anything they used throughout the album. And it was very interesting how they went out of their way to be artistic, both music, with the musicality of it as far as the instrumentation goes. And it showed in this song. I loved it. It's a fantastic song. Like I said, instrumentally and vocally, I found that David's vocals in this particular song were the strongest of the entire album. And it ends with that ah-ooh at the end. It was just beautiful. I loved it. I had it 10-9. This Must Be the Place over The Dead Next Door.
All right. Well, it sounds like we've got a complete fight. Let's see what Richard has to say in his post-fight.
There isn't a lot of breaking down to do here. The pre-fight number said 5-4 for Talking Heads, and I also threw in that there'd be a split vote. And we had a split vote, and the average of both the official and unofficial cards came out to a very close 86-85, or, in other words, 5 rounds to 4 for the Talking Heads. Looking at expected rounds, Billy Idol took 7 of the possible 9 points, even sweeping the common expected round of round 1. The Talking Heads only took 5 of their expected, but made up for the difference with a sweep in the unexpected round of round 2. So it looked like a close one, and it was. Hey, if you didn't score at home, give these albums a listen just for fun. Look on Twitter at Pete's or my feeds, or just ask us, and we'll give you a link to the Spotify playlist for the fight. You won't be disappointed. In fact, you'll probably have a hell of a lot of fun. This has been a great one. Back to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a split decision. I mean, that's the main thing. Phil had the fight 87-84 for Billy Idol. Todd had it 87-84, going the other direction for the Talking Heads. And then I had a very, very close 86-85 for our winner, Talking Heads Speaking in Tongues. So this is a fantastic album. And really, from my point of view, I think we got this right. I mean, we agreed on a lot of rounds, and there were just a couple differences, but these were close. These were close and well matched up. And I was surprised. I thought that, like you guys, Billy Idol was going to get smashed by the Talking Heads' prowess, but that wasn't at all the case.
Yeah, I felt, and I may have been a little harder on Talking Heads than Billy Idol, just because it's almost like they're in my rotation of music, and I was almost overcompensating for my fondness for Talking Heads, and maybe graded them a little harder and harsher than I would a normal band. Since, I would say Talking Heads is they're in my top 7 favorite bands. So I have an affinity to them, and maybe treated them more like a kid that you expect more out of than a band that wasn't Talking Heads. So that may have been reflected in my score, but I enjoy both of these albums, and you could play them both today and you would hear me singing like a crazy 14-year-old or 13-year-old when these albums came out.
Yeah, what about you, Todd? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. I wonder if maybe I was a bit harder on Talking Heads, but what's interesting, though, what you wind up singing as you walk away are more of the Billy Idol songs, because they're more melodic than, with maybe the exception of This Must Be the Place. So you wind up getting that's something more that you can sing or run around the house kind of stuck in your head later. As much as I like This Must Be the Place, it took several listenings to kind of get it into my memory.
Yeah.
And even then, the lyrics are so angular and bizarre that you really can't sing along to it even. So that's not a problem with the Billy Idol stuff. Even the guitar solos you can sing.
Did This Must Be the Place have to go last? Like, if that song would have come up earlier, would it have been too complex?
It points the way, I think, to a lot of their later stuff that they do, like you said, with True Stories, which I'm not as familiar with, or the one that has Road to Nowhere on it and stuff. I think this points the way to kind of a new range of his songwriting.
Fair enough. Fellas, thank you so much for joining us this week. I really appreciate and truly enjoy doing this with you guys. I got to say, it is a lot of fun to be able to hang out with friends and talk music and put it together in a unique way. And so I'm always thankful for the chance to do this with you guys. Yeah,
it's always a lot of fun. And I love the extra perspective that this gives me on the stuff. So I'll listen to it differently now.
Right. You learn, I learned the funky roots of Talking Heads, even though I own probably 5 Talking Heads albums. I didn't really grasp the funkiness of them until I sat down and analyzed it track by track and really broke down each song. And I was like, holy crap, these guys are a funk band. And I think I was just so focused on the quirkiness of David Byrne and his lyrics that I just missed that.
It's crazy that, guys like him and Fred from the B-52s should absolutely not be successful musicians,
Yeah.
But they find a way to get it done, and it's just great.